Welcome to Plaidwood's MLK, Courageous Conversations, Perspectives on Race. My name is Choongho Kwon. I'm one of the pastors here. We gather here together tonight as our fifth Courageous Conversations. Tonight's event consists of two parts. First part is panel discussion. You can hear from our panelists tonight. And then we will have a Q&A time. When we have a 1-minute break, please submit your questions to Pastor Jazz on floor. He will read those questions for us. And this courageous conversation is basically conversation, not debate. Our panelists are going to share their stories and their thoughts with us. And they have their vulnerability here and courage to share their stories with us. Just listen carefully and just clarifying questions for yourself and others bring up in the end of this panel discussion. Then next week, next Thursday, we will have a group conversation after a main presentation. Our panelists are going to join your group, can have your personal conversation with them. So that's what we're going to have tonight. And this is my joy as also a minority. So I will speak as one of pastors here and also as an Asian American here in Plaidwoods. And also, it is our joy to have Candace in our courageous conversation. She's our new staff added last year, right? And the director of spiritual formation. I'd like to introduce Candace to you, and you can talk about yourself to us. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Candace Shaw, and I am the Director of Spiritual Formation, which the first question I always get is, what is a Director of Spiritual Formation? Which is the first question that I had when they were trying to hire me for this role. And so my job is basically to cultivate and approach this faith formation across all generations and across all groups in our church community here at Plaidwoods to help us live into our missions and our values and our practices. So I just started here in October, so if I haven't gotten to meet you yet, I would really like to meet you and have a conversation. I grew up here in the Northland on the Liberty side, and my husband is Scott Shaw. He leads the contemporary worship service on most Sunday mornings, and we have 2 kids that are in 3rd grade and 6th grade.
Great. Thank you for joining us tonight. I don't know how many of you have been in our previous courageous conversations. We had a panel discussion on race, human sexuality, and gun violence and depression. And tonight, we are going back to race. We titled as Perspectives on Race. So some of you might think, why do you do this? Why do you talk about these difficult issues in a faith community? I would like to ask Candace to give us some answer to that question first before we start.
When your title is Director of Spiritual Formation, you get all the spiritual questions right off the bat. I think that it's important that we have these conversations because the topics that we talk about this are spiritual, right? Our faith is not separate from the rest of our lives. Our faith is how we live our lives, both our thoughts, but also our actions, our decisions, and I think most importantly, what Jesus modeled for us is that our faith is how we love our neighbors. And we can't love our neighbors if we don't know our neighbors and if we don't listen to our neighbors. So having conversations and learning from each other about what we are hopeful about, what we what brings us joy, what are our pain points, what things are hurtful to us. And so that happens through conversations like these to help us love our neighbor.
Thank you. And also as a pastor, I believe this is our Methodist heritage. From the beginning of Methodism, John Wesley and early Methodist Church, they talk about social issues, slavery and poverty issues. They didn't mind talking about those things in faith community. So we are having that kind of a legacy and continue our conversation on these issues. Before we go further, Candace, would you introduce our panelists here on stage quickly, just briefly, and then they will have a chance to talk about themselves later.
I'm going to stop talking so much in just a few minutes. First, we have Solomon Abeke. He has been a member, or has been coming to Platwood since 2018, I believe. And he is currently a youth specialist with the Division of Youth Services. He works in a residential facility for the state of Missouri here in the Northland. And then we also have Jim Kanki, is that how you say it? Jim Kanki. And he is a retired public TV fundraiser, and he has been attending Platwoods here for 30 years. He's from Chicago, but then has moved to Kansas City, and we're glad he's here.
78 we moved here.
In 1978, he moved here. And I'll let them tell more about themselves and their stories.
All right. Will you open us with your prayer?
Yes. God, thank you so much for allowing us to gather here today. Thank you for holding out the weather so it's good enough for us to be here safely. Thank you for your presence among us, and we seek your presence here in our conversation. We are here to seek awareness and your wisdom when we speak and listen to others tonight. Take away any anxiety or fear or arrogance or self-doubt that we may have. Give us courageous spirits so that we can follow the guidance of the Holy Spirit with open minds and make a difference in the world as well as in our life. We seek your will be done on earth, and in Christ we pray these things. Amen.
Amen. And according to the book titled Meeting God at the Boundaries, which is a United Methodist publication, this is a quote I'm going to read from this book. The United States is on a fast train to a multicultural future. In fact, the train has already arrived at the multicultural station. The crucial question for the church is this: will it act out its stated commitment to be an inclusive body of faith, or will it remain a predominantly ethnically and racially shaped institution that, in its daily life and institutional process and policies, projects a message of exclusion? Our denomination, United Methodist Church, has a vision of an authentically inclusive church. But this reality is the church is still cultural enclave. The church is less multicultural than other institutions in our society. So we got had a research on the current statistics about the diversity in our area. So Candace, would you share the statistics of diversity in our local community and whatever numbers you found?
Yeah. So obviously, local community means a lot of different things here at Platwoods. We have people who come from all across the Northland and, as well as other places in Kansas City and on Missouri and the Kansas side. But for our very local community, the Missouri Methodist Conference puts out demographic data. So I have this for 641, the zip code 64151 and 64152, which are the ones that are right near us. So according to this, our racial and ethnicity breakdown is 2.5% Asian, 6.4% Black African American, 81.3% white, and 6.2% Hispanic or Latino, and 3.7% Pacific Islander, American Indian, or other. Park Hills School District has also demographic data, and theirs are similar. 3% Asian, 13% Black, 10.7% Hispanic, 0.4 Indian, 6.2 multiracial, 1.3 Pacific Islander, and 65.4% white non-Hispanic. At Platwoods Church, we obviously don't take a census like the government or the school district does, so we don't have specific data about race in our church, but I think we can reflect on the faces and the people that we see on Sunday morning and think that maybe our church is not quite as diverse as the surrounding area and the school district around us.
Okay. For me, as I mentioned, I am here as one of minorities, Asian Americans here. For me, like I was born and raised in South Korea, so I'm the first generation of immigrants, and my children, they are the second generations. For me, since I moved to the United States, I came to understand my gains and power and authority as a minority I had in Korea. And moving to America gave me kind of a racial consciousness, figure out more, and then finding out kind of a new identity. And here, the becoming a minority in this society, like becoming the other it's a kind of culture shock to me. And when I first came here, it has been almost 23 years now. But since then, I feel like I am one of members in this society, but people don't look at me like that at all. Still, in one of cases, I was asked by one of colleagues in our conference, we'd like to make a devotion book from the pastors in our conferences, and would you write some devotion for that? Maybe you can use your cultural background. I understand what she means, but I have been here as your colleagues for 20 years. So what cultural background you're talking about? In my 20 years cultural background or before then? So that's kind of experience I have. They still see me as a foreigner, but I can cope with that because I'm the first generation as an immigrant. But here we have two panelists who have some different background. I may ask Solomon first. Can you share your story a little bit, how you came to this country and how long you have been here, and those background information for us?
Thank you, Pastor. I haven't really had very serious first-hand experiences racially while growing up. But while in high school, as far back as 1974, apartheid was really at its peak in South Africa. And we were involved in their struggle in the sense that the African National Congress in South Africa had representatives in Nigeria. That's where I come from. I'm a Nigerian American. So we were making contributions to the Congress to help in their struggle back in South Africa. And our country, too, was involved, too. They also were supporting the Congress. Even black South African, we had black South Africans who would come to Nigeria for school, either in college or university. So that was my very first experience. And then when I went to college, I also had the opportunity of reading Martin Luther King books and Malcolm X, Elijah Muhammad, that's his name. So I also had first-hand knowledge of what went on in the U.S. And then when I started coming to the U.S. as far back as the late 80s, 1989, as a visitor, I didn't really experience any form of racial issues. And finally, I came in here in 2017. I still didn't experience any, but when I started working with kids, black kids, then I began to hear stories from them, about what they went through, what they do go through, and then began to give me a better understanding of all I had been reading in the past and then what was happening here. But personally, I haven't experienced any of such.
Solomon, you lived in United Kingdom before you moved to United States, right?
Yes, I did.
When you said here means you came to United States or you came to Kansas City?
I came to the United States as a resident through Houston.
Houston.
Yes, that was my first call. But Houston was too busy for me because it was totally distinct from my experiences in the UK, being a very quiet place. So, but I moved to Kansas City in 2018, just on a visit. My wife's cousin invited me to come and visit. And when I got here, it was cool, quiet. The people were friendly, and I told him I wasn't going anywhere else but to stay here. So that's how I came to Kansas City. And then in 2018, I came to Kansas City, and then I also came to this church because I'd had some contact with the United Methodist too in Houston, and so I loved it there, and then I also chose to worship here, and since then I've been coming to this church, But I was traditionally an Anglican before, but I've been worshiping in United Methodist since 2018.
Thank you. Tell us about your family a little bit more. So you have a good number of children, right?
Yes, I have 5 kids. 4 of them are Americans. My eldest kid is still in the United Kingdom. But 4 of my kids are all here in various cities in the U.S. And they're all doing very well, too.
Okay. Thank you. Jim, would you tell us, you didn't come to United States. You were born here, right?
I was born here.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm Japanese American, 3rd generation, born and raised on the south side of Chicago. My wife and I, Lydia over there, who we came here in 1978. I guess I should back up. I worked in public television in Chicago for 14 years. My wife taught elementary school. And then in 78, we moved here, and I worked at public television here, Channel 19, KCPT. Hopefully you all heard of that. And my wife, Lydia, taught here in the Park Hill School District at Union Chapel and then at Plaza Middle School. And we are both retired. We retired in 2006. Let's see. Well, being born on the South Side, I grew up with nothing but diversity around me. You named the ethnic background, and we had it in Chicago, still do. And so I think from an early age, I've come to respect a lot of different ethnic groups and the cultures that they represent because I got to experience them. It really was a great opportunity that I had, and wish more people had those kinds of opportunities because I think when you have that, you have a better understanding of what's going on in the country and why some of it is so questionable today. Well, I'll leave it at that. I suspect we'll probably cover that a little later on. I have three siblings. I have 2 sisters and a brother. Both of my sisters are retired. One is retired from NASA, 38 years of NASA, and the other is retired Harvard professor and spent a lot of time in Nigeria. My brother is still hopefully gainfully employed out in the Boston area. So we have one daughter who is married, 38, and lives in Fairfield, Connecticut, and in Melbourne Beach, Florida. And with any luck, in a couple of weeks, we'll be down in Melbourne Beach, Florida. So I think that's
All right.
probably my best.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we got some questions here for you, to both of you. First question is, what is your earliest memory of race? Related to that, you already mentioned a little bit, but I want to ask Jim first. So you are the third generation of Japanese American family. So can you tell us a little bit about how your grandparents, when they came to United States, and then how the life of their life and your parents' life were, if you remember their stories, to share with us a little bit?
My grandparents came, my best guess is in the late 1800s. I'm guessing that because I think my dad was born in 1918, mom was born 1919. They came to California. My dad was born in the Bay Area, Marin County. Mom was born in Upland, California, which is a suburb of Los Angeles. Her family were farmers. I think Grandpa had a 5-acre lemon grove, and my dad's father was a cobbler, and I don't know if he was a cobbler in Japan or not, or if it was just something that he had to take up when he got here. But in both cases, they left Japan just because of the opportunities that they heard about, anyway, coming to this country. So they were extremely pleased with being able to come here, very pleased that their kids, my parents, were born as American citizens, and very proud of that. So I guess that's pretty much where I am at this point.
So you grew up in Chicago, very, in diversity. So what was kind of earliest memory you really conscious of that part, and also have some kind of consciousness as a Japanese American? Some kind of an incident you felt about it?
I don't know if it was necessarily a racially motivated thing, but when you're 8 or 9 years old and you're coming home from school, and the other kids will pick on you or knock you down or grab your hat or something like that. And I suppose in a way it might have been racial. I didn't really look at it that way. I looked at it as somebody took my hat, and I was going to have to go home and tell Mom that somebody took my hat. See what was going to happen there. As far as some of the other ethnic things that I've run into is primarily, I think, when I was in Boy Scouts. We happened to be in a very diverse neighborhood. Whether that was good or bad, who knows? There were plenty of fights going on, but we had an explorer post that had 2 Japanese Americans, 1 Chinese American, 3 Puerto Ricans, 2 or 3 Mexicans. We had 1 or 2 that were Egyptian, and then obviously some black and some white. So, we just, you're going camping with these guys, and all you worry about is can you survive and stuff, and really race didn't have anything to do with it. I think, like Solomon here, I can't say that I had any real racial incidents.
Mm-hmm.
I think the ones that I've had were really kind of good. I mean, I've worked with great people. two ladies in the office. One was Greek and one was Jewish. I had some tremendous food and learned a lot about those about their culture and probably some words that I probably shouldn't repeat. But that's it was a good experience. I've had that opportunity to have good experiences.
Okay. Well, I want to ask Solomon to share your also early memory of race. You already mentioned about some apartheid in South America. You already heard about it and you felt about it when you lived in and educated in Nigeria, and also you lived in England. So you got more international experiences and backgrounds. Tell us about your kind of a memory of race or some racially conscious. How did you grow up with that? How did you start growing that kind of consciousness?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, my very first experience with racism, was from what I read, literature on apartheid. I don't know if any of you have read a book called The Mind Boy. It's a literature text for high school. It depicted all the practices in apartheid South Africa then. And this was when Nelson Mandela was still in jail before he was released. So that was my very first encounter with what was going on about racism. And like I said, we were made to contribute towards their struggle in South Africa. Even our government was involved. And I think even the United States too imposed sanctions then against the apartheid regime, So it was a worldwide struggle against that regime in South Africa, And also, like I said, I also had read about Martin Luther King and Elijah Muhammad called Malcolm X too. So I had some expose about racism in the United States. But like I said before, I haven't had any personal experiences. My kids too haven't, but I know that, there are certain things I say and my kids tell me, no, that is not politically correct. You can't say that. There's this and there's that. So I came to be aware of what is right and what is wrong to say, So, but no personal experiences with racism. But I've encountered people who have had experiences. I'm working with kids right now who also have experiences too. So that I will share as this conversation goes on.
Yeah. For me personally, was not really aggravated, but sometimes I feel like annoyed whenever people ask, why did you come to America? People ask me again and again about it. So why did you come to America, Solomon?
I get that a lot too. Lots of questions about why did you come to America? Like I said, I've been coming to America since 1989. It was just search for something better. The environment, a different environment, some option for my kids. I didn't have that kind of option. My dad was a rural man. He was a teacher. My mom was a nurse, but they were rural people. They didn't like to go anywhere. They didn't like to travel. They never even gave us an opportunity to go spend holidays outside our home. Home was the best. You got to stay at home. So we never really traveled anywhere, So growing up, I wanted to give my kids that opportunity to decide what they want to do with their lives, whether they wanted to be here or be here. that opportunity which I didn't have. So that's why I came to America, to give my kids an opportunity to choose what they want to be, where they want to be. That opportunity which I didn't have as a kid, you know. But it wasn't because I was running away from anything, you know, or being persecuted or anything. No, I just wanted that option for my kids.
So your coming to United States is not related to any war or refugee and some other situation. For your, just make a better life for yourself, right, and your family.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Pastor.
Jim, I believe people ask you, why did you come to United States too, right? How do you respond to them?
You mean, why did I come to Kansas City?
Oh, why did you? Yeah, that's a better question.
I think that goes to probably the only incident that I would have, and it's not one that's personal, but it's from my family, and the of course with the war, the Japanese Americans on the West Coast were interned. Ostensibly, it was for their own protection, but we don't really think so. The families were given, I think, up to 2 weeks to gather whatever belongings they can put into 2 suitcases, and then they were going to be shipped off to these internment camps. On my mother's side, my mother was in the LA area, and a great many of the people there were bused to what they call a staging area, and it was the Santa Anita racetrack. And they were just literally given a stall and lived in that stall for 3 months while the camps were being built. And at that point, they were shipped off to a camp right on the Arizona-California border. It was out in the desert. The name was Poston. And so they ended up in that camp. My father's was from the San Francisco Bay Area, and the camp his family was sent to was Grenada, which was right near the Kansas and Colorado border in Colorado, also in a very desolate area. I was telling Pastor Kwon that, but Dad was only in camp for a short period of time, like a couple of weeks, because he was an American citizen and he was drafted. So he, at that point, being the good American, decided that he would enlist in the Army, and the Army wanted Japanese speakers at that time, so he enlisted in the Military Intelligence Service, and because his Japanese was California Japanese, he had to go to a school in Minnesota to learn proper Japanese. And at least from that point on, he served in the Philippines as a translator and interrogator, and then came home briefly, and then served with General MacArthur in the occupation forces of Tokyo immediately after the war. The whole internment business was, as far as we were concerned, and as far as pretty much history is concerned, was pretty much a racially motivated act that should never have happened to their own citizens, as it was. So.
And your grandparents had to stay there internment camp,
Yes,
even
they
after
had to
the
stay
war,
in the camp,
1946.
Yeah, even though Dad was serving in the Army, they had to stay in camp.
Well, Candace, I will ask you to share your questions with them.
Absolutely. We'll start with you, Solomon. What did you learn from your family of origin about your racial identity? Was that ever talked about in your home, or since you were the racial majority in your area, was that not a conversation you had? What did you learn, and how did that shape your perspective on race?
My parents never discussed race with us. We were proud citizens of our village, So it was never up for discussion at all. Like I said, my dad was a rural man.
Yeah.
Though he was a teacher, but he also was a farmer too. He liked to till the soil, and we all were going to farm with him. So that was our thing. We, even though we were in school, even though we were doing all that, we still would go to the farm too. So it wasn't about race. We were proud farmers. So I guess farming was our race.
That was more of your identity.
Yes.
Was what your family did. What about you, Jim? Did you talk about race in your family? How did that shape your identity?
No, I think in our families, being proud to be an American was uppermost. Being an American citizen, get a good education, make something of yourself, whatever it is you do the best you can at it. Take your piano lessons. And I think race wasn't talked about, except that maybe something might be said to you one day, but just don't pay any attention to it. Well, as I'm sure Pastor Kwon probably knows too, if someone's going to drive by and shout some racial slur at you, more than likely he's not going to pick the right race, in my case, and probably not in your case either. So I guess we'll just have to consider the source and move on from there.
Do you feel like it was a conversation that was purposely avoided in your family, to try to really embrace the American identity, or do you think it was just not something that your parents really thought about that much?
I think you'd have to ask them whether
Sure.
they purposely avoided it. I think they did avoid it by creating diversion and making you do something else instead of thinking about that. Go and read a book or practice your piano, but no, we didn't talk about race except to acknowledge the fact that it was there, and sometimes it's going to rear its ugly head, and we're just going to have to go past it.
What about you, Pastor Choongho?
When I grew up in Korea, we didn't talk much about it. People on the street in my neighborhood all look like me and look like us. So I grew up as one of just the majorities in society. So it was a whole new thing to me when I came here. So sometimes I got a question, the conversation, discussion on this issue with my own children who were born and raised in here in Missouri. And as I said, people ask me, where are you from? And I'm from Kansas City. And where are you really from? I was born and raised in South Korea. But they have to deal the same question. My children who were born and raised, so what is real mean to them? Oh, Kansas City, Missouri, you mean? Or Kansas or something like that? So we got this question. My children, they like to deal with these things. It's not serious, as a serious issue mostly. And I'm okay, they are fine. They usually said, they are okay, but I can see, observe, they gaining more racial consciousness with their ages. My high schooler in home, most of hanging out friends are Asian friends, the Vietnamese and Koreans, and definitely he got some other Caucasian friends too, but he's just hanging out with them more. And my college boy is in college. I never said that, but he just joined the Asian student group and joining in. It's like kind of natural to them, finding out, gaining some consciousness, finding out their origin. So that's how they live, how we experience it. But specifically, they are not that much diligent to share some experiences. For me, one of my experiences was when my mother visited us from South Korea. We had a shopping at Walmart. One of the ladies passing by said, my mother and I were talking Korean in the store, and then one of the persons passing by said, "Speak English, this is America." And she was so fast, I couldn't catch her up at all. That was a very small incident. And whenever some international fair happened, in Asia, we got some threat happening, some corner of the world, like China and America issue. We are worrying about it. People might see us as a Chinese, and then might some yell us, or we have to think about that kind of thing whenever it happens. We don't have to say here, "I am not Chinese" or something like that. But we can see that some news, what's happening in a subway in Metro City, some Asian family visiting New York City was insulted by people. That kind of stories, actually, we heard a lot and we experience once in a while. There's no opportunity for us to talk about these things in front of people. So that's what actually this place means to me, at least. We can share these things to a lot of good people here. But I will say this racial prejudice is not for some bad people do bad things. Sometimes good people do bad things, bad people do good things, right? So it is just for some sharing our stories and helping you having some awareness. Also, we can understand our society better too. So that's where I am.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting that we have 3 of the 4 of us grew up in places where we were the racial majority. I grew up here in the Northlands. I am white, and as you can see. And so that pushes that conversation a little bit later in life. You may not have experiences as early in life as someone who is growing up the minority in their community. I think it's important for all of us, whether we grew up as the minority or majority, where we grew up, to think about those first racial experiences, that we had that racial awareness that we had. I think mine wasn't until I was filling out bubbles on standardized tests, and you have to fill in your bubble for your race. And to a small child, neither the word white or the word Caucasian really makes a whole lot of sense to a small child. And so that was probably the first awareness. So I think next week when we have our small group conversations, we'll get to share, all of us will get to share our experiences with that, because it's not, we all have our first racial awareness, but the more of us that are if you're in the majority, you might have that a lot later in life than someone who grew up as the minority race or ethnicity in their community.
Okay. Well, thank you, Candace. I think this time we'd like to ask your thought and your opinion. So going out to finding some takeaway from this conversation. So tell us your thought about how can we foster relationship in a way, promote racial reconciliation or racial justice in our society. How do you think what we need to do, and what our society can do, make this our community as an inclusive society? Solomon, would you go first?
As a church,
Church?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the church is doing the right thing right now by having these conversations. You know, it's a good thing for us to talk, for us to listen, you know, for us to hear the opinions on both sides of the aisle. That's a right step in the right direction. But I think the church still needs to do more. We need to also go out, you know, reach out to people. Like my kids at work, when I tell them at work, I attend the United Methodist Church. Oh, is that a white people's church? That's what they tell me. And I tell them, God doesn't have color, and this is God's house. And so we need to go out and go out there and reach out to them. We also have people who come in from other churches or groups to talk to them, and they don't seem to enjoy what those people do for them, you know. And I know that I've been here since 2018, and I still keep coming because I like what is going on here. But we need to reach out, you know. A visit, for example, from this place to my facility on a Sunday, they probably will enjoy your visit more than they do right now from other people who come, because they don't seem to enjoy what those guys come to tell them, you know. And we are not allowed to do it ourselves, you know. But like we have what they call a liaison council. It's from a church close by who they come to the facility. And I know that this church has partnerships and relationships with other groups. So we can do such. We can go out, we can reach out to attract more people so that the church can change that stigma of being called white people's church, you know, to an all-embracing church. Yes, we're doing the right thing right now, and I want to applaud the church for that.
Okay, thank you. Jim?
Well, I think that what you're doing here with this series is certainly a step in the right direction, and it's very heartening to see the church taking this kind of a position. I think moving forward, you know, if you're going to talk about race, you have races in this church. I was talking to Candace, and she's Irish. So what do we know about the Irish? What's the history of the Irish here? I mean, I've read about some of those things in grammar school, but what's going on in the Irish community? What's going on in the German community? All the other races that look like you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But I think having a place like the church to talk about all of these different things so that people can learn about different races, regardless of how they look. But I think that's when you start to see progress in racial understanding, because you have to understand those races, and you can't understand them just by going to church in 2 hours and going home. You really need to sit down and have somebody stand up in front of you and tell you about them, so that you can learn something about them. And I think then you start to get some understanding that translates to a better community that you're talking about.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. You know, this courageous conversation this year especially was sponsored by the Justice Ministry team. We got 3 subgroups focusing on the what we think most important things for our community. Tonight's topic is about some race relations. Through this conversation today and the presentation next week, you can hear more about some sociological background, the modern minority. I'm going to talk more about Asian immigrants and immigration history as a main presentation, and then our panelists are going to join a discussion group so you guys can have some more conversation with them. Through all these things, for the goal of our racial justice conversation here at Plattwoods, and through this courageous conversation, I can say three things. First, awareness, so building our knowledge and understanding about race and racism. We already had a good small group discussion in our first one a couple of years ago. The second important thing is relationships. You just heard that. Just hear their stories and share your stories with people in this community. And I believe all racial justice is relational and requires healthy friendship and collaboration in order to be on this journey together. The third important point is commitment. So it is a commitment to dismantle racial discrimination in our community and promote practices and policies even that provide equity and justice. Those three things, awareness, relationship, commitment, are the kind of our goals of our ministry and our justice ministry team. So you can join us, and we have this conversation continually each month. So we haven't started our new meeting in this new year yet, but we'll have it soon. Candace, do you have any comments before we conclude this part of discussion?
I just wanted to thank everyone for coming today, or for those of you who are joining us online. I think this is an important first step, like we talked about. But then, as Solomon said, that can't be the last step. That we have to continue the conversations, as Jim was saying, and get to know each other and to really reflect on our own stories. I really appreciated when Jim asked me, what is my race and ethnicity, because I don't get asked that question very often, right? But it's a legitimate question and an important one. And so I think if you haven't thought about that question for yourself, to maybe before you come back, hopefully next week, to spend some time thinking about that as well. Do either of you have closing comments that you'd like to say?
Thank you for having us. I hope we were able to contribute what you wanted.
Absolutely.
Thank you too.
Yeah, well, thank you all.